When did you start talking about transition, detransition on Twitter or on social media in general?
So I guess it would be just last November. So it's still really fresh.
Yeah. What prompted you to want to talk to others or just to the void?
Not really having a support otherwise. When I decided to start detransitioning, it was actually also in November. Uh, my entire community had been trans, or they were family and friends that I wasn't ready to go through that whole process of coming out again and going into all the questions and answers. And so Twitter seemed a great place. It was anonymous. I could connect with other people in various ways.
Mhm.
So it definitely made it feel um, a lot easier than, is it Florence and the Machine where she says something to tell a room full of strangers easier than telling you alone? So there's something to be said for the anonymity, being able to talk to people that you don't know. It's much easier than people who are close to me.
And what about like Reddit or other forums, Discord forums about detransition?
No,
No.
no, I never really got into all that. I didn't get into Reddit in general before. I mean, I'm 35. I kind of feel like I was above the age range for starting in that. I was never a Tumblr person, not a Reddit person, so it kind of just seemed
Okay. Then, in general, was the internet at all involved in your transition, or at least thinking through the lens of gender or a gender paradigm?
Yeah, so there was a forum in particular, a trans forum called Susans.org. I'm not sure if you'd heard of it, or
No.
if anybody else had mentioned it. It was run by a trans identified man who had basically funded their own transition, was very political and progressive way. And so it was a forum for new and experienced people to kind of congregate. So that's definitely where whenever I had any questions to learn anecdotally, to get any information medically, that's where I went. That's where I did so it was my version of when people talk about Reddit and Tumblr.
And you brought up politics. Was gender and a political concept for you, or a personal concept, or like more one than the other?
Um, I guess kind of, well, I think more personal. I think it became political.
Hmm.
Uh, I was never very political to begin with. And so it was more um, sort of the in my own head. So it was definitely very personal.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, where would you like to start if you would want to tell your biography? Like where would we start? Like in your discomfort with your gender or your masculinity or your femininity or your body?
I mean, I'm good to start anywhere. I know,
Like when you were
quoting another,
5 or 7 or.
yeah, I mean, I don't like that kind of a story only because I don't believe that kids really have a concept. I think that that's a lot of, I can't remember the term, but
Retro.
yeah, the retroactive narrative where you're able to, when you feel a certain way as an adult, go, oh, I always knew. I mean, I could definitely start as a kid because there are definitely things that were true, but it wasn't like an actual concept that I was aware of, if
Hmm.
that makes sense.
Or a persistent discomfort with your body.
Yeah, I didn't, so it wasn't discomfort with my body. I had much more of affinity for being friends with girls. So all growing up before I hit puberty, if I was ever role playing, I was a princess or the mermaid. If I was at school, I was playing with the girls, wanting to sound like them, act like them. But it wasn't even wanting to, because again, I didn't have a concept that I was a boy playing with girls. It's just what I did. I knew that I wasn't athletic, that I wasn't interested in what boys were doing. I wasn't interested in um, the the rowdiness of boys, and I just wasn't that kind of kid. I was the gregarious. When I read a lot, I was very sensitive, very fanciful, imaginative. So all of these qualities that people would associate with femininity, I had, but I never thought of myself as a girl. It was more, I just liked the way they were more than I liked the way boys were. If
Hmm.
that's it was a lot simpler than people want to make it out to be.
But okay, it might be simple. Then this thing called puberty comes along. Does that is that was that complex? Did that like stir the waters a little bit?
Yeah, it pissed me off because it wasn't the, oh, I wish that I were growing into being a woman. It was, well, now I can't do that anymore. Like suddenly I was cut off. So it wasn't, oh, I'm growing up the wrong way. Oh, I'm developing the wrong way. It's, I've now lost my ability to hang out with the girls, to play with the girls, because it all changed. Suddenly, boys and girls were supposed to be separate. I grew up very religious. So, like, boys and girls were separate. They did their own thing. There was not that kind of like intermingling. Not to say that we weren't ever allowed to be around each other. It was, you knew that boys play with boys and girls play with girls. And as you were growing up, sexuality and attraction and being appropriate, and then also the message that's given to boys versus girls is very different. And so it was more like I was like I said, I was pissed.
Hmm.
Like I can't just be myself. I can't just keep doing what I was doing because now it was weird. Was I actually showing interest by wanting to be with the girls? I was questioned on that. Like there was never any talking about being gay. So I couldn't just be like, oh no, it's okay, I'm gay, I'm not interested. That was never a thing that I could do.
Okay.
And so yeah, puberty was never like the I hate being a boy growing up into being a man. It was I hate that I've now lost my connection to just kind of be myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And did you how how did you discover that there was this gay aspect to you rather than the straight aspect to you? Was that a surprise that your sexuality was
Um,
different than your society had a concept for? Or
I don't know that I would say it was a surprise. It was a little jarring. It's kind of like when puberty hits, it hits, and that's the case for everyone. Suddenly it's just all right there. And when it's suddenly sprouting, when there's nothing you can do about it, like you can't make it stop, you can't divert it, you can't do something about whatever is going to just naturally happen. It was an added source of being pissed because it was not only now can I not intermingle with the people that I was intermingling with, that I was playing with as a kid, but now I'm actually attracted to the people that I didn't want to play with as a kid, and I'm now being told. And so I couldn't associate with them. It's not like I could like shift my way over because I was always in my head, don't let them know that you're interested, don't let them know that you're attracted, don't let them know that you're gay,
yeah.
or whatever I called it. And so it was like I no longer had a choice on either side. And so it was very, my being gay, it was, I had, what do we call it? Well, I mean, it's same-sex attraction, but at the time it was such a, oh, you're attracted. Oh, you have same-sex attractions. It was like the naughty thing to say. Like, no one said gay because that meant you were admitting that this is who you were.
Huh.
Attractions meant it was something that you could deal with. And I had the idea that I could deal with it,
Okay.
which was bullshit.
I
I'm sorry. Is it all right that I swear? Because I may at any given time. It's
no,
kind of
no,
part of my lexicon.
it's fine. We got through the
Okay.
first 2 minutes without swearing, so you can you just like so anger, alienation,
Hmm.
teenagehood.
Hmm.
How did you start to? How did you deal with that? There's a lot of different ways. You can self harm. You can dress weird. You can just write angry poetry on the stalls of bathrooms and rest stops in your area. Like, how do you deal with that emotion?
Um,
Alienation.
there are a few different ways. So escapism, in the sense of, I mean, it's a very Christian thing to be escapist. They talk about the rapture. They talk about the end of days. They talk about heaven. And so it was very natural for me to think, okay, once I'm an adult, I will be out of here and I can do what I want. And so it was just there was the looking forward to that. But that wasn't enough
Huh.
because when you're 13, a month feels like a year and a year feels like 10.
Yeah.
And so that was just that was like in the future, like I will get there eventually. Um, to be blatant, porn was an escape. Because and that was honestly my only connection to anything that was gay.
Hmm.
I wasn't aware of chat rooms and that kind of thing. I wasn't aware of I mean I was 13 in
Community.
2000.
Yeah.
So yeah, so like it wasn't like it is now where like you can hop on Reddit, you can hop on Tumblr. Those things I didn't have that concept. And I also didn't have a concept for what gay was because aside from being the butt of a couple jokes, it just never was talked about. And so I didn't know what else aside from, well, people say gay is sex, so gay sex. Like it just kind of clicked
Okay.
in my head.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I was definitely living a double life where I was still very active in the church and I was on the worship team. I played piano and I was the oldest of three. And I had people with grown children who would look at me and say, I wish my kid was like you. And so like there was a lot of that being funneled into me, like people thinking that I was this like perfect, wonderful person. And in my head thinking like, yeah, but I like dudes. And it was just this
Mm.
constant back and forth of if only you knew. And so it was really a full-time job to keep up that charade,
Yeah.
to be secretive, to hide things, to learn not to look, not to make eye contact, not to say the wrong thing, not to do the wrong thing. And so then by the time I would be home, I would be exhausted that it would be porn and dissociation. Like that was really what else would there have been? And
Yeah.
so that's how I got through my teenage years where it was a lot of work to like just pretend to be normal and which normal wasn't really I wasn't normal anyway, like in real life. Like
Kind
I
of
was an awkward
artistic,
teenager.
awkward. Okay.
Yeah, I was awkward. I was sarcastic. I was very childish. Like I because I wasn't growing up, because I was keeping all of this tamped down.
Yeah.
I was still like there were times at 16 I was acting like a 10-year-old, but then I was also acting like a 30-year-old. It was just very bizarre. Like I was trying to compose myself a certain way,
Yeah.
but I also didn't
What do you
want
mean
to.
by like a 10-year-old like throwing water balloons at your pastor when he comes out of jail?
No, just being very, I was the funny person, but I was the weird person. I didn't know how to connect to people my age
Yeah. Yeah.
because I couldn't connect to either side.
Yeah.
And so kind of acting like the childish clownish kind of person was my way of getting by.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
When you're policing yourself, are you also policing your tone of voice and your gestures to like not be like flamboyantly gay?
hmm
Was that the level of self-policing that you're?
To an extent, I actually had a litmus test. Year or two younger than me, there was this kid who was very flamboyant. He was out from a fairly young-ish age. And so he was kind of the one that I'd be like, all right, don't act like him. Like I was able to like be like, those are the things that I won't do.
Hmm.
And like so it was, I had an example, like don't talk with a lisp, don't talk with a girly voice,
Yeah.
don't use hand gestures. Like there were just certain, and it wasn't like it was a constant, like, don't do these things. It was, all right, as long as I'm not doing what he's doing, I'm fine. I'm good.
Did you see him being treated negatively for the behavior?
Kind of. I mean, he was the butt of jokes, but he was very catty back. So he was one of those like, I don't really care what people think.
Yeah.
And so I think once people realized he didn't care what people think, it kind of toned down a bit
Huh.
because if the person you're bullying doesn't care that you're bullying them, then it's not as fun. And so it kind of like it lost its luster, I think. His mom had also died at one point, and so I think there was that like, oh, feel bad for him, don't make fun of him too much. And so they kind of like people laid off a little bit because of that too.
Hmm.
But yeah, there was definitely I didn't want to be highlighted. And so I just was like,
And
just fly under the
yet you're
radar.
still making people laugh. So and you're playing in the worship team. So you still enjoy or at least fit into a social milieu. You don't hide your. I guess you hide a lot of
To an
yourself, but
extent.
at the same time you're still making jokes and facilitating
Yeah,
good time, kind of.
I guess.
Yeah.
I guess. It didn't feel that way, but I
Yeah.
suppose,
And
yeah.
what about I guess you said that you're in the worship team, so I'm just wondering because you said earlier when you're a kid you're imaginative and art. I just assume that you have like an artistic sensibility or creative sensibility. Does that do you find any way to channel your energy and be free in a positive way, like through painting or dancing or not
Like at
wrestling?
that point, or
Yeah,
what do
in
you
your
mean?
teenage
At that
years,
point?
or writing, or
Uh, I did some writing. And so yeah, as far as creativity, writing and piano, I played piano a lot,
okay,
and that was actually I forget about that sometimes. That was definitely somewhat of a channel. And I wrote. I didn't write as much as a teenager. As a kid, I wrote plays and songs and stories, and I was very creative that way. But as a teenager, it was much less of that. Um, I don't know if I don't know if it was I didn't want to because it was just another thing. I'm not quite sure why I wasn't writing as much.
hmm.
I read a lot. I definitely lost myself in reading.
But like
Um,
novels,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I was a Harry Potter nerd. That was
okay,
definitely, I know a lot of people are. That was, I can't remember how old I was. I was like 13, 14 when I was given the first three as a gift. But that was also another thing that you can talk about because Christians, for the most part, were all like, "Oh, it's witchcraft, it's evil." There were like people. It was actually banned from my school. No
oh
joke.
really?
My mom read them before giving them to me because my grandmother had wanted to, and she was like, "Don't tell people you're reading these," but I don't know what their problem is. Um,
Okay,
so she,
are you
yeah,
still in this area where you grew up?
not super close. I'm in the
Okay.
same state, but I'm on the other side
Okay,
of the
yeah,
state.
I don't want to dox you or anything. I just is this Midwest? Is this kind of East Coast? This sounds like a rural community.
It's East Coast. It's
Okay,
actually not rural. It's just I lived
just very
in that
conservative. Okay,
environment. Like
okay,
my school was run by the pastor's wife, and I graduated high school one of nine. Like that's the kind
okay,
of environment I grew up
okay, okay. And you had no access other than the internet to other societies or cultures.
in.
Okay. And what kind of Christianity, just to kind of understand how morality was dictated? You know, was it very fundamentalist, kind of evangelical, or charismatic, or
Yeah, so it
straight
was
laced?
Assembly of God, which is an
Oh,
offshoot of Pentecostal.
okay, yeah.
Yeah,
I have
so
some
like the
roots in there. Yeah,
fun, fundamental charismatic,
funny. Yeah,
like all of it's in there. And it was very social, where it was
yeah.
like I consider Assembly of God, no matter where you are. Like I know people talk about the Bible Belt and how in the Midwest, like everyone's socially Christian. Like if you're Assembly of God, no matter where you are, you have that aspect. It's very socially Christian. It's just a normal part of your everyday life. You listen to worship music in the car. You talk about going to Jesus camp with your friends. It's just a normal part of your whole life. Um, and and guilt was a big a driver. You know, when
Hmm.
someone messed up, it was the passive aggressive guilt. The we still love you, just repent. We still love you, just repent. Um,
Hmm.
and it's like just a lot of things that I tried to avoid. I didn't want to be caught. I didn't want to be known. I
Okay.
didn't want to have to go through the whole. I knew it was all bullshit, um, and so I didn't want to go through the whole. We love you, just repent. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I'm very caffeinated, so I'm not super like
No,
straight
no,
line right now.
you're doing fine. Interesting. Okay. And so you somehow get through your teenage years and you get
Hmm.
to a point where you get to make a decision on how you're going to become an adult and gain freedom or distance or go somewhere else, maybe even college or, I don't know, a mission trip or something. So,
Hmm.
what are you thinking about when you see the end is near of kind of being under wraps?
Yeah, so I knew I was going away, and I knew I was going to college because I wanted to go to college, and
For anything or for. something?
So at the time, I went in for media communications.
Mm.
I wanted to do like screenwriting, directing, that sort of thing. Um, and my parents' stipulation was if I went away and they were going to help pay for it, which I wanted them to, that I was going to go to a Christian school. So I picked a school in Kentucky, and it was a very small Christian school. And I just wanted to go. I don't know why I picked Kentucky as the state. I know part of it was the school itself. They had connections to the Olympics. They had an internship in LA. There were definitely appealing aspects to that for someone who wanted to be in that kind of atmosphere.
Mhm.
So I was like, all right, it's something I'm used to. It's something because I bet if I had chosen a big city, I wouldn't have known what I was doing. Going to a school that was Christian in a Midwest state, it was a safe choice while still being away.
Yeah.
It was like the next step forward, thinking, okay, I will learn how to move forward instead of just suddenly appearing in New York like some people do. Like I wouldn't have been able to do that.
Okay.
Much as I wanted to, I would not have survived. Um, I would have been one of those sad stories had I just gone to like a big city, like where
Yeah.
people go to the big city, they lose their shit and then they die. Like I would have, I could very well have become that kind of person. Like it'll eat you up, honey.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's
And
a big gamble with the prodigal son because you can end up being eaten by the pigs or feeding the pigs, but you'll probably go down a dirt. Just a
yeah,
little
yeah.
Christian reference for anybody out there
hmm
who knows
But
how
yeah,
Jesus
going to
said.
a Christian college, it's funny because I lived on a floor with a bunch of pastors' kids and missions kids who were just as jaded
Mm,
and and not
yeah,
disenchanted as I was.
yeah, yeah.
And so there, that's where I started doing what any normal college kid would do. I started partying because they were all just as we're done with the church, but we still have to have our parents pay for being in school. And so we all would get shit faced on the weekend. And so like I was like, okay, mom, I'm doing what you wanted me to do, and I'm doing what I wanted to do.
Okay.
Like it worked out. I think I was on that floor or in that dorm when I visited. And that's what made my decision to go there of all the places. Because I was like, this is the atmosphere I want to be around. Other people who are like, screw everything. And like I had access to any drug I wanted. I had access to alcohol. Like it was like a normal school.
Hmm.
Um, but just that dorm, like other parts of the same dorm and elsewhere were still
Oh,
very straight laced. So it was like this was like the place to
edgy.
be. Exactly. Right. I was so edgy.
Oh,
I
well,
thought
I
it was
mean,
really cool.
yeah. So, and did you did you last the 4 years there?
No, I was there for 2 years.
Okay.
At one point, I was quasi-suicidal. I was having ideations. I was still very closeted.
Okay.
Um,
Well,
I,
let's work up to that just a little bit. So you get to
sure.
school, you're partying, you're
Yeah.
studying. What's your relationship to academic performance, and what's your
Ooh,
relationship to yeah?
it plummeted. So
Okay.
I had a 3.9 GPA graduating high school, and after like towards the end of my second year, I knew I needed to leave because it was like a 2.5.
Okay.
Like it was bad. It was not reflective of my capability because I was not putting in the effort. I wasn't caring. You know,
Yeah.
it was just I was there to party and to do all the things that I felt like I wanted to do now that I was away from home,
Yeah.
but I didn't balance it with the reason for being in college in the first place.
Yeah.
Like I had no,
Yeah.
yeah.
But doing all the things that you wanted to do didn't include expressing yourself as a effeminate man or as a
No,
homosexual,
no. It
same
was still a
sex.
Christian school.
Okay.
Even the people I was around, it was still like there were people who were a little more feminine, but I think I was still like I wouldn't even have known how to go about expressing that because I had pushed it down so thoroughly that as much as I wanted to, I I I don't know that I could.
Oh, okay.
I still didn't feel like I could, and I think part of it was because I picked Christian school because it still was very the aspect of what if I get caught? What if it gets found out? Because then you're no longer independent. Your parents are finding out, you know?
And
So
so
I
this
still
is
had that like keeping myself back because of it.
and this is 2008, 2009.
Um, 05, oh 05 to '07
Oh,
were the
okay.
years that I was in that school. Yeah.
And you said that you began to become depressed.
Yeah, because I was still very secretive. I was still closeted. I hadn't told anyone. Um, and because I was alone with it, I was, it was feeling worse because I had thought, well, that was going to be something else I could just not worry about. I could just be free with. And then being there, knowing like I couldn't, or I wasn't letting myself. And so the reason that I'd been wanting to leave home in the first place, I wasn't able to do anything about it even there.
Hmm.
And so that was definitely making me feel really depressed. I still felt isolated. I felt like I was still singling myself out because of it.
Hmm. And policing yourself. Your
Not policing myself nearly as much.
yeah, because
That wasn't really a big deal, but still keeping it under wraps
okay.
for sure.
What,
Yeah.
you don't have to answer this, but I'm just wondering, like, what do you do about having a crush on somebody or super powerful romantic feelings for somebody that's a friend of yours that you're not allowed to feel for? Are you able to not even go in that direction with your feelings of affinity for other boys?
Basically, yeah.
Okay, so you don't. So I guess you don't have to struggle with that, but you're not that is not manifesting too. So I guess you're suppressing even allowing yourself to go in that direction with your feelings, let alone your
Hmm.
desires.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah,
decided to leave.
I did. Um, I knew I wasn't doing well uh, during my second semester of my second year. And I had been, so my parents had inadvertently found out about the partying during my freshman year. And I
Wait,
told them I'd stop.
did you doing a line of coke surface on MySpace or something like that?
No, I was home for spring break because I had decided to go home before I'd been invited to go to spring break with other people. And so it was kind of too late. And so I was there and I got a call from them. They were all shit faced in Florida and I was really jealous. And um, I'll always remember this conversation. And my mom doesn't remember it. It's so funny to me because I'm lying on a couch and she goes, "Who was that?" And I said, "Oh, those were friends of mine. They're in Florida for spring break." She goes, "Oh." I was like, "What?" She goes, "Well, do you wish you had gone?" I was like, "Well, of course I do. Like, they're friends of mine in college. Yeah, I wanted to go, but it was too late. I was already coming here." She's like, "Oh, well, people only go to Florida for spring break to get drunk and have sex." And I was like, "Yeah." She was like, she looked point blank at me. She goes, "Do you drink?"
Oh,
And I was like, and I don't lie well.
yeah.
And so I was like, and I was also put on the spot. So I'm like, she goes, "Great." And she throws her hands up and she starts going with this. She goes, "My son's an alcoholic." and, and so that was how my parents found out. And my dad had to sit down with me the next day and was like, I'm have a loan out for you to be there. Like I'm helping pay for your school. And as your father, like I can't justify spending that money for you to be there if I know you're doing that. And so I had to promise I wouldn't do it, which lasted a good few months. It worked for a little while, um, but then when it
Hmm.
started happening again is when I started going downhill because I was like, I I think that I don't know if it was the pressure or what, but it just was it was a lot. Um,
Hmm.
and so during my sophomore year, I actually I don't know if came out is the right word, but I told my parents that I was having my struggles. I finally said something. Um, I wrote them a letter in 2007, and in before I went home for that year's spring break. And so I'd gone back to school from spring break my first year. I wasn't doing any partying, anything. I finished out that year. I went home for the summer, went back for my second year, started partying again. And at that point is when I was starting to feel more like everything was a lot more tenuous. Like I was feeling much less stable.
Mhm.
It wasn't as fun for me anymore. It was more of an escape. Like it had caught up to me. It was pretty quick for it to catch up to me. Um, and so then that spring break, I went home again and I told them, I came out to them. And what I said was, I have these attractions. It's been happening for a long time and I want to do something about it. Um, and I let them believe that it was, I want to get rid of them. I didn't know what I meant by that, but I didn't want to be in secret anymore. And
Hmm.
it was too much. Um,
I can, yeah, I mean, trying to put myself in that situation, you're going to have a lot of relief, but a lot of risk at the same time, right? What do you're risking everything potentially. They could withdraw everything from you, and not just financial support, but how did they react?
so my mom, well, my when I wrote the letter, I found out later that my dad had been away. My mom called him. And this was about 2, 3 weeks before I was coming home. I wrote the letter in anticipation, but I was vague. I didn't tell them what I was telling them. I
Okay.
just said I have something to talk to you about. I was very like, even then I was a little dramatic. I was like building up the tension, like, I have something to tell you, and you're gonna have to wait 3 weeks.
Screenwriter.
Um, oh my God. And so my dad, when my mom read the letter to him, he said, he's gonna come out to us. She goes, what? He goes, yeah, he's gonna tell us he's gay. She was like, why would you go? Why is that the thing you would go to? He was like, what else would it be? And so I got home and sure enough, that's what I told them. And and it started with my mom was she wasn't angry that I was gay. She was angry at herself for not having known. She didn't it wasn't the oh it's my fault you're gay. It's the it's my fault you couldn't tell us because she wished that I could have told them sooner.
Yeah.
And so that put her in a position of not I don't know if it would be grief necessarily. I guess to an extent she was just very broken up about it, feeling like she had done something wrong that I didn't feel like I could have told them before. And my dad was very lackadaisical about it for a little while. I think because well, I don't really know why. I don't know if he just didn't know how to talk about it or if he didn't want to talk. I'm not really sure. He was just very his reaction was a lot more blasé in the beginning. I think because he had the idea that I was going to fix it, and so it was like, all right, I'll wait and see how this goes. Whereas my mom was just she was a mess about it. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, and that lasted for a little while, where there was that kind of dynamic,
How did you
and it was
feel?
I felt like I needed to now catch up, where I'd been holding a lot back, not catch up sexually, but catch up like growing up. I'd been keeping myself back. I was still the silly guy. Like in college, I was still like an extension of what I was in high school. I was the silly guy. I was the fun guy. I was always very bitchy and sarcastic and funny and um, like I was very sociable and but it was all like keeping all that back. So then I was like, all right, now I want to actually work on the things that I was holding back. Um, and it's not like I was suddenly this like super self-aware person. I was just like something needs to change. Now that I've said it, I can't just do the same thing I was doing because I've said it. Like I let it out. Um, and so I decided to leave school after my second year, which I almost immediately regretted. Because I didn't want to leave all that behind. I was enjoying being there. And so it was like that wrestle between I needed to leave school, but I didn't want to. I was
Hmm.
like, I was halfway through. So I was like, why not just do the next? But I ultimately didn't go back. Um, and I decided to go overseas. There is a program called Master's Commission, which is like an Assembly of God discipleship program where they basically train pastors and missionaries and all that kind of fun stuff. And
Hmm.
so I decided, though, I didn't want to be in the US because I didn't want to be in the same kind of environment I'd been in the States. I thought it would be different in Europe. And it was. I went to Denmark for a year. Um, and
And
I
did what?
essentially,
Like saved the prostitutes or read the Bible
yeah,
or?
there were a lot of Bible studies and there was a lot of like personal development. It was essentially like when people do a gap year and they do traveling,
Yeah.
it was like that only for like working on your relationship with God and yourself. So it wasn't so much like missions work. It was more like how do we prepare you to be good Christian adults is essentially what the program was. Um, I did get to do some traveling. I did get to. I mean, it was a great year in general.
Hmm.
I lived in Copenhagen. I got to travel to Estonia and Africa, and like it was a very
Dynamic.
cool year.
Yeah.
Um, and by the end of it, my being gay hadn't budged. Like I had prayed my ass off. Like I had prayed so much, and I fasted at one point, and I wanted so badly to believe that I could just like get rid of this thing that had been following me for so long, thinking it was believing what Christians were saying that it was something you could pray away.
Hmm.
I grew a lot as a person, but that didn't change. And so I got back home. Now this is in 2008, and I came out for real. And like for like it was gonna stick this time. Like it wasn't, I'm coming out and I'm gonna go try to fit. It was like it didn't work. Sorry,
Hmm.
I tried. And my mom was like, I thought you were going to get rid of that. I was like, I mean, I kind of was, but it didn't work. So I don't really know what else to tell
I
you.
gave it the
Like
old college try, Mom.
exactly, like what do you want me to do? I was like, I
Yeah.
literally didn't eat anything for 3 weeks. Like I
Yeah.
did what I could, and I it didn't work. And and so then that's when my dad suddenly started to pipe up, where he realized like I was giving up. Um,
Hmm.
and and yeah, that was. And when it comes to, I know that this whole thing was to talk about like when I felt like I wasn't at home with myself, my femininity, and this is about where it really started to spring up because when it was secret, it was something that I didn't have to face. When it was secret, nobody knew about it, nobody had any opinions on it. I didn't have to consider what it meant for me. I thought maybe it's something that would go away. Coming out for real, um, making it actually exist, there's no putting it back.
Hmm.
Um, and so suddenly I was becoming the thing that I was so afraid I was going to become when I had it in secret for so long. Like I didn't ever want to say I was gay before because, well, no, I'm not gay. It's something that's just there that can go away. And then actually officially coming out meant I was now the thing that I was convincing myself I wasn't for several years. And so for my dad, it suddenly was the I would never be able to go to a gay wedding. I don't support that. I could never like suddenly he had all these opinions on it. And
On it or on you?
yes,
Yeah.
yes, it both. It was, I'm choosing this. I'm, choosing to give up on fighting it. That I'm going to be, and he'd always been very casually homophobic, making jokes and thinking things were ridiculous. He had never been the kind of person to be like very anti-gay or very angry about it. It was just like a joke would come up every so often. So I knew that he thought it was ridiculous,
Hmm.
but then he showed the other side of it when it was me, when it was, and it was never anything physical or it was never verbally abusive. It was, I don't agree with that. And
Disapproval.
if that's disapproval and also like low key disgust. Like it wasn't like you're a disgusting person. It was like the I can't believe you would do that. Um,
Hmm.
and so that it was like, so all that time that I didn't want people to disapprove of me, now I was getting everything that I'd been afraid was going to come.
Yeah.
Um,
And you're
and that
22, 21.
21, almost 22. So that's really what set up um,
Hmm.
like the whole, for me. So transition for me was not a way to, I'm supposed to be a woman. It was, I'm fixing what being a man doesn't work with. I'm fixing this.
Hmm.
I'm going to be the right way. I'm going to be a normal child. I'm going to be what my parents would prefer. And so for me, it was more escaping to something. And because I was out as gay for almost a decade. Um, and that's a whole period of time. Like, I don't really need to talk too much about it. Like, I was happy sometimes, I was not sometimes, but no matter what, over those years, I never felt like I could be free as a gay man. Like, it just never felt right for me.
Were you always close to home, close to where you grew up? Or you? Yeah.
Usually, I lived for the most part, yeah, I lived within an hour
Did you ever go to the
of
big
where
city
growing up.
where you could just immerse
I did.
yourself in?
So I lived in a city for a couple years, and at that point, I was feeling fairly good. Um, but I was still, I carried a lot of self-loathing all throughout my 20s. I carried a lot of that, like I, I gave up. That like I'm now the person who I shouldn't have been. That I should have been able to get rid of. I'm now living the life that I was never meant to have lived. Um,
Were
I
you able to find a partner?
I did for a little while. It didn't really work out very well.
Okay.
Um, I was never really stable enough for a relationship. I definitely I engaged sexually with myriad of people. I used that as dissociation, as a way to feel. Um, it was
Hmm.
sometimes I think there was the idea that having a relationship would be something positive, and I didn't deserve that. And so if I
Hmm.
had something like that, or if I had something that would be close to that, I would sabotage it. Um, it just, I wasn't supposed to have that. And
Did you have any access to a therapist? Any desire to talk to somebody in that capacity?
I saw a therapist for a little while. It was okay, but like personality wise, I didn't feel like super comfortable opening up. Um, and instead of like doing what other people do, where like I might find somebody else, I just kind of stay with it for a little while, and then I just kind of dropped off. Like, I wasn't really at a point where I think I was ready to talk about a lot, and so there was not really much of a point. Like therapy, I know that going to therapy is something that's very good because at one point later on I did, and it was great, but you have to be ready for it, and I wasn't,
Okay.
because I didn't want to be better. Being miserable felt right because it felt like I was supposed to be, because it felt like, well, I I chose to give up fighting. So if I'm going to be gay, I'm sure as hell going to make myself miserable for not fighting it.
You don't give yourself a break. I know it's not your fault, but it seems like
No.
you had so much pressure you put on yourself while you're growing up, and then
Hmm.
and then you're an adult and you're still putting tons of pressure on yourself.
I came out. I did the thing that I was so afraid to do. I didn't want anyone to know. I didn't want to admit it. And then I did, and I still didn't let that go. It didn't give me, like, I never gave myself the permission to just let it go. And so coming out was supposed to be the time where I was letting it go, and I didn't.
Hmm.
I don't know if it would have been different had my parents been on board. It might have been to an extent, but I kind of have to believe that no matter what, I still would have had some kind of, because I had been training myself since I was starting puberty. I mean, I was hardwiring into myself that I was not right because I was this way. And so if that's the case, it wasn't, being gay is wrong. It was I am wrong. And so because I wasn't homophobic, like I wasn't against other people for being gay, I was against myself. And so that just became a part of
Hmm.
my own self-perception. Like it stuck. And so yeah, transitioning was a way to escape all of it. It was a way to I felt like maybe I could start over, like I was becoming somebody different. My transitioning wasn't I know I'm a woman. It was I need to start over. I need to fix this. I need to do what didn't work in Denmark. I need to do what didn't work when I came out. And it worked for a little while. I mean, being on drugs is a hell of a thing. When you start hormones, it's like being on drugs. Man, it's an addiction.
Hmm.
And it felt like I had finally found the right thing. And my sexuality didn't change. I was still only into to men. Um, but
Well,
I felt like I was into
yeah,
it the right way.
yeah.
Like I was supposed to be into it as a woman. And so like, yay, like I finally right. Um,
The
but
how did you discover that transition was a possibility?
um, so so I was would have been 26. So in the mid teens, so
Yeah,
like 2014, 2015 in there. Like I knew what trans was when I had been in college, not the first time, but I went back to school at one point,
to
and
study.
actually finished
Yeah.
English. I got my English degree.
Okay.
Um, and that was like in '09 to 12. I knew a couple of
Yeah.
trans people there because it was a state college in a city. And so um, I got to know what that was all about. I got to know people who were. It seemed appealing to me, not in a personal way, like I wanted to do that, but I liked the idea of it. I liked the idea that you could be a bit different, that you could subvert your reality, that you could. So like that was kind of a thing that was just sort of there. And so I consumed a lot of television. I've always been into television, and that show Transparent on Prime. Um, I watched that, and I had not felt about other anything else the way I did about that show. There was something about it that spoke to me because it made it feel very freeing. It made it feel the storyline makes it feel as though this person is finally freeing themselves after all of these years of they say living a lie, but living in misery. And
Hmm.
where really what it was is somebody was just saying, "Hey, I've been miserable. I could be this person now." When people say I'm living my truth, what they're really saying is I'm I'm living a life that I no longer have to live that one. And that felt perfect to me. And so that's where that really sparked from. The idea that I could change my name and take hormones and my body could look different and
You could
people would
grow your
perceive me
hair.
differently.
I
I
mean,
yeah.
it's gorgeous. Your locks are gorgeous. I'm just saying,
Uh,
like the
I
self
never
expression, like where you try to fit into the man box, and then you get to like, well, I can actually feel
I
nice.
yeah, I gave myself permission to be feminine, even though I wish I could have just done that before. Like I gave myself this permission that I'd never given myself before, and it's not because I was becoming a woman. It's because I was no longer me. It's because I was becoming somebody else. And so by becoming somebody else, I was no longer the person who deserved to be miserable because I felt like, well, if I'm not him, I'm this other person. He was the one that was fucked up. He was the one that needed to be miserable. He was the one that had all this stuff.
Hmm.
Now I'm this person, which means I no longer felt like I deserved to be miserable. I fell in love with someone and was in a relationship with them for 3 years. I grew my hair long. I called myself somebody, myself a different name. I, um, you know, played around with fashion and clothing and makeup and all of these things that are so stereotypical to femininity. But for me, it wasn't like, oh, this is what women do. It was, I'm able to express myself because I'm allowing myself to now, whereas I didn't before. And so transitioning was not my realizing who I was supposed to be. It was finally I get to be somebody that's allowed to be happy.
Hmm. Which is wonderful. At the same time, there's these body and mind altering drugs that are given to you by a medical establishment who's
Hmm.
on board with this. So, getting access to
Hmm.
that, did it come packaged with therapy? Did you get lined up with an endocrinologist who carefully assessed you? And
No, I lived in an informed consent state. So all I had to do, so I'd been seeing a doctor for several years. Um, I I was known as a gay man. It was part of the clinic practice, and
hmm,
like it was sort of catered to. I don't know how to explain that without doxing myself.
okay,
Um, but
I
so
like that. I was known as a gay man.
well,
It's just so like
a gay centric clinic,
okay,
and so it was like most of the people who went there, like it was very community oriented, but a lot of people were LGBT and
yeah.
T. And so when I went in, I had the appointment, April of 2017. I walk in, I say, we have a conversation. I think we had had one or two appointments before where we had like had the conversation, but it was me and my primary. It wasn't an endo, it wasn't a therapist. It was just me and my primary having a conversation. And so in that appointment, I asked some questions. I had done some research. I'd been on that forum I had mentioned. I had gotten some anecdotal evidence and
Hmm,
hormones and all that kind of stuff,
mhm.
different knowledge. And at the end of the conversation, he was ready to have me sign a letter saying I understood the risks. And that was it. I walked out of there with my prescriptions.
Drug test to know how much to give you of the
No,
antigen?
he started me at the low common dose. He
Okay.
started me on he was like, this is where I start everybody at a low dose just to see how your body takes it, and then we'll up it in a month if everything looks fine. And
Are you taking
um
the androgen blocker and estrogen?
but all together right at the
Okay.
start. And I
Okay.
had qualms about that at first. I was like, I don't know that I want to do estrogen first. I think I want to just do the blocker. He's like, what, are you nervous about changes? And I said, yes. He said, here's what I tell you and what I tell everyone. With estrogen, you won't see physical changes for several months. You don't have to worry about that. You will know, you will know that this is right for you within a couple of weeks because your brain, your thought patterns, and the way that you feel will start going in the right direction.
Wow. Is this a
That's how he termed it to
psychologist?
me.
This is a
No,
endo?
this is just a primary.
Just a GP, a general practitioner.
Somebody who had treated a bunch of other trans people before, and that was their only actual basis for this.
Okay. And I'm sure that he
So,
kept files and was very rigorous with
I mean,
his
I'm
data.
I'm sure he had files, but he just gave me
Okay.
the green light.
All right.
He convinced me to take it, and I was like, all right. So like, I wasn't going to. And him telling me that convinced me to start with everything.
Okay.
He also said that you need one hormone or the other. He's like, your body needs a hormone in your system no matter what. Like, you can't have none.
Okay.
He's like, so if you do start with a blocker, I only want you to do so for 1 to 3 months, depending on how your body is, because if you go too long, you could have different adverse effects. And he was like, so even if you don't, so it was basically like all of these things saying, like pointing to, I should be starting with estrogen
Yeah.
instead of just the blocker.
Okay.
Um,
Had you already social transitioned at this point?
I had been for less than a year.
Okay.
It hadn't been very long. Like I'd been gender fluid, but I had had no therapy. I wasn't calling myself anything. I
Okay.
wasn't saying that I felt like a woman. Um, I was saying that I might have said that in the appointment. I know there are certain things you tell a doctor to be convincing, so I very well could have said I wanted to be a woman. Um, but And that was part of it too, where he was like, even if you're not sure, this will this will better help you understand if you are.
A woman or a trans woman, which is different than a woman in in that clinic. Is there a difference between women and trans women? This is kind of pre
You
trans
know,
women or women days, so
it is. So it's I don't think that was a concept. I don't know that I remember that kind of a
okay.
concept. It could very well have been that that was avoided just because it was a conversation I was having with them personally, as opposed to it being like an organized event or whatever. Um,
What year
but
is
yeah, he
this?
this was
April of
2017.
okay.
This was 5 years ago.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, so he told me that he wanted me to go to therapy. He said I strongly suggest it. There is no requirement for it.
Hmm.
And I said I already wanted to. I knew that I wanted to go to therapy. Um, I didn't start until 2, 3 months after I was in the throes of hormones. So getting a post HRT diagnosis was kind of a breeze. Like I go to therapy and it's like I'm pretty convincingly like, oh, I'm trans.
Mm-hmm.
Look at me on these hormones. I feel amazing. The
Mm-hmm.
therapist is like, good for you.
Hmm.
You're a woman now. Like I wish that we had had like how it used to be. You got to wait a year or two. You got to go to therapy for a year,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
actually figure some shit out because, homophobia and being gender nonconforming and having the trauma of my own doing, like my own psychological trauma I wreaked on myself for years. Like
Hmm.
none of that was questioned. It was, oh, this will be the answer to your problems. Congratulations.
And
Um,
everybody stand and claps.
yeah. I was able to change my preferred name when I got to that point. I was able to at the clinic. Um,
Wait, they have the legal
yeah.
documents right there. You just like you sign it and then they send it
No,
in. Here's your license.
the way that it like when I go in, like when you go in and they call your name, they were able to put my birth name and my preferred name so that they would call me by the preferred name.
Okay.
So that's what I mean. But like they would be
Okay.
like, so, and at my appointment, my very first appointment when I was leaving, she said, as soon as you know what name you want us to use, we'll put that for your preferred name. And I don't know. At what point I was asked about surgeries. I don't know that it was at the first appointment. Some people say it was. Like some trans people say they were asked. It was something I was asked early on. So like some of these things, like when you go into a doctor's office, they want to understand how they're going to have you tracked. Like what direction are you going in? And so they will ask these questions that they think are evaluative, but
But they're
it
suggestive.
puts it exactly. And shocker, 2 years later, when I'm going to therapy, I'm diagnosed with OCD. Like,
Obsessive. You're already yeah.
so
And
like,
from
which I had
13.
had for years.
Yeah.
So
Policing.
like,
Yeah. Just focusing it on yourself. Like don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. This is not right. This is not right. This is not right. So whether your obsession with not being gay caused was caused by your OCD or that thought pattern was exercised through your fear of being gay, like it became like a ruling pattern of your life.
and then trans, boom,
Boom.
like obsessing over a way to fix it.
Being a woman. So we didn't touch on this. How do you come out? So you come out to your parents. That doesn't work. You get to come out again. What are you like? Okay, how am I going to break this to my parents, or how do you strategize?
So my dad was easy at that point. So my in between all that during my 20s, my parents had split. My dad ended up with somebody else. Um, and then he ended up with early onset dementia because of a cancer treatment. Like he went through a whole thing.
No. Okay.
We ended up being super estranged. I made my peace, like letting go of him. And then he wound up with cancer. So I'm like, great, now I have to be connected again.
Now I have to love my
Um,
daddy.
now I kind of, I mean, I'm the oldest, so it was more like now I have to be responsible.
Yeah.
Um, but no, so by the time I started my transition, my dad was an easy one. He was already like,
Okay.
yeah. My mom though, yeah, that was. I kind of put my mom through the ringer through my 20s, just because I was such a shit show myself. It wasn't anything like I did to her. It was her just having to hope that I'd be okay.
Yeah.
Um, and so I was like, so now there's something else that she's going to be afraid for me, and she's going to be, it's going to be like a new thing. Like we had just been like our relationship was good. I was past a lot of the like the crazy phase of my early 20s. I was a lot more stable like life wise. And so then I start transitioning and I'm like, well, I didn't want to blow that all up again. And so yeah, I had to strategize like how to come out, like how to tell her. And so it was a dinner where we went somewhere public.
So
And I
no letter 3 weeks beforehand.
no, I wasn't doing that shit again. So we go to dinner, and I can't remember the conversation word for, like I can't remember all of it, but she knew that I'd been experimenting just like with my presentation. Um, and she was fine with that. Like it was like a little like, oh, you're wearing makeup now, but it wasn't like it was like, okay, all right,
Okay.
at least you're not, fucking around and
Getting
dying in a car
monkeypox.
crash because
Yeah.
you're an alcoholic. It was like she, I would, she's like, I'm gonna take it. It's minor. So then I'm telling her, and I can't remember how I worded it, but I was very careful, um, to say like this is something where I think it's more than this, and essentially was coming out. I can't remember if I said I'm trans or if I said I'm going to start transitioning. But what I said to her was I wanted to tell her first because I didn't want her finding out from anyone else, which is also why I had come out to my parents before anybody else the first time, because church people and Facebook, and I just didn't,
Yeah. Yeah.
I never wanted to risk that. Um, so like I did what the opposite of what a lot of people do, where like they don't tell their parents. So like, I was like, I'm doing this first, just because I didn't want that to be a thing. Um, and she said, I support you and I want to be, you know, understanding. And the conversation seemed very good, where I was like, I had come out. I said I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I didn't know what direction. This was long before I started hormones, like a few months or so before. And because I came out as transitioning on my Facebook on my birthday that year, and so like I wanted to tell her before I did that. Like I made sure to tell her those things too. I was like, I want to respect you by telling you this isn't me being like surprised. And she was like, did you bring me somewhere public because you thought I'd be upset? And I was like, no, I wanted to feel other people around me because I was so nervous. Like I'm the kind of person that feels more comfortable when I'm out. Like I could never study at my own home. I had to be out at a coffee shop, or
Hmm.
I liked being out around people. Like there's something about external noise that helps me to kind of settle into myself.
Huh.
Um, and so I was telling her that, it said it's not you. And so then I'd started the hormones, and I started to look a little bit different because hormones for me, like I'm 5'1" and I have small features. Like I'm already fairly feminine. And so hormones started doing their work fairly quickly.
Hmm.
And that was a lot more hard once she realized like how real it was.
Okay. So fat redistribution, which is a funny way of saying that
Ah,
started getting a different shape.
kind of.
Skin softness. Like how are you appearing different that your mother sees? What does your mother see?
Um,
Your voice kind of
my
changes. Like what?
my voice didn't change. And if any man tells you that their voice changes in estrogen, they're full of shit. Um,
You actually have to work on it. You have
you
to
have to
train.
work on
Yeah.
it. Yeah, yeah. This has always been, I never did any work on it. I I guess I'm not really sure how she saw it. I think it was more what I suddenly started wearing. Like I wasn't one of those like, I never wanted to be slutty.
Yeah.
Like
Slutty. Okay.
I was 30, And so I never understood when somebody in their 30s and 40s suddenly started dressing like a 20-year-old. I'm like, I did that. I'm not 21. I didn't want to dress like it just didn't
You
make
want
sense to
to?
me.
Okay, yeah.
And so, but like the way I was dressing, it was more than guy that likes to dress a little feminine. It was now like I was shaving my legs and wearing a skirt and for me, I was like, it's the summer, it's hot as fuck, and now I'm identifying as a woman, so I'm gonna wear a skirt, so I'm not instead of shorts. And but it was little changes like that where my
Hmm.
mom was would see it, and it would be a little bit more and a little bit more.
Yeah.
And finally, we had a conversation about it, and she was like, I'm not convinced that this is who you are. She said, I have the feeling that there's something else going on. She's like, I know that you've always felt out of sync with yourself and that something has always been off. And she was like, but um, she's like, I'm not convinced that this is it. I'm not convinced that this is the way for you to figure out what it is. She said, I don't want you to go in this direction and regret it. I don't want you to make changes because you think that this is what you're supposed to do and then it'd be too late to turn back. She's like, I don't know how else to say it but this. And so I was like, I was a little surprised, but I was like, I thought, when we had talked about it before, you're more on board. And she was like, yeah, she's like, I honestly didn't know what it was you were saying. And now that I'm realizing more, it's much more difficult. And so I was upset but not angry. Um, and so
That's a
she and I have,
very. I just have to give props to your mom for being. It seems like she was seeing something that nobody else was seeing, and she was able to tell you something that nobody else could tell you. Whether
yeah,
she's right or wrong, it seems like the way that she frames it was pretty wise.
I think she also knew because I had definitely had anger issues in my 20s, um, which it was not like abusive anger.
No,
Well, it
like
was to certain people. It
Tony
was never
Soprano,
physical.
like going. Okay.
Right. But I was very hot tempered. I was very resentful of things from growing up. Had a lot of anger with my dad.
Mm.
Um, when my parents split is when my mom and I became closer, where we were able to have better conversations. But she was very aware that I was dealing with a lot of stuff. And so, yeah, when she told me that, I wasn't angry. I was upset because I didn't know how to move forward because she was such a significant part of my life. I didn't want to move forward, but then have that be a consistent struggle.
Mm.
But I also was not going to be like, all right, whatever, I'm done with you. I was like that. I never understood why people did that either. So I was like, how do I deal with this? And so what I did was, so she and I have always been very good at written communication. I get my creativity from her. And so I wrote her a message. It was an email and it was saying like, I want you to know I'm not angry. I want you to know I'm not blaming you for anything. And I said, you know, if you are in a position where you feel like you're grieving or you feel like you don't understand, I was like, I get that. And I don't want to prevent you from being able to do that. But I can't be part of that because I felt like because I was going through something so good and that I was changing in a positive way, that didn't really fit. And so what I said was, I will let you go through that process as long as you need to. And I'm not going anywhere, but I need to step back if that's where you're at. And I said, this isn't me cutting you out. This isn't me. And I said, and this isn't even me. Like, I'm not upset at you for being here. If I'm moving forward in other ways, and every time we're around each other, I feel like I'm going backwards. I don't want that to become an issue between us. And and I thought I was doing the best I could with that because I was like, I'm not gonna write her something angry or say we're
Hmm.
done. Um, and so I think we didn't talk for like, it was like a couple months or so. It wasn't a really long time. And then she wrote me, she was like, I feel like I've hurt you and I'm really sorry. And I was like, you have nothing to be sorry for. And I said, and you haven't hurt me. I said, this really was like but she felt cut off because of how she was feeling. And I think I didn't realize I was, um, I don't know if, I guess you could call it manipulation. I mean, I didn't think of it that way. I was doing this so that I wouldn't be that way because I thought that it would turn into that because I knew myself. I knew that I had a lot of issues that I had to work through.
Hmm.
And, but I think inadvertently I was doing the thing I didn't want to do, which story of my fucking life. Um, so yeah,
Hmm.
it was a tough go
Yeah.
for her for a few months. But yeah.
And so you get on hormones in 2017. The
Hmm.
idea is planted that there are surgical procedures that you go through that are additive and subtractive, let's say. Um, you change your name, change your style of dress. How far are you going to go? You feeling really good? Does the feeling of fittedness increase and then you need to do more because the hormones work? Well, now I need to do more. I need to do more because this is the right path. This isn't just me doing one thing, it's a path. How are you thinking
So
about that, and what's the journey
yeah,
like?
yeah, so surgeries were something I didn't want to do until I'd given myself enough time. Because I did for a little while get obsessive with before and afters, but one of the benefits of that is seeing really bad afters and thinking, and I also read a lot of anecdotal, so like people saying that if you do surgeries too soon, it could actually be worse because you haven't given yourself the time to develop. And so as much as I wanted to change things, so instead I obsessed over the process, but I started to learn how to wait, knowing that like this is going to be a long process. I don't want to do things too soon and have because I saw plenty of trans women with beach balls. I saw like
Oh,
beach,
okay.
like basically like
Yeah.
taking a flat chest and sticking something huge in, and I was like, I have
Boink.
no interest in that, and I didn't want to go that way anyway. Like partly because again, like I'm so small that that kind of surgery, I was like, that wasn't even a thought in my head, and at the time, I was not interested in bottom surgery. I was like, that's not something I want to even think about right now. There were a lot of other things that were already happening in my head.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so I got really good at makeup, and that was kind of my big thing. Um, I also I started dating somebody about oh God, only not even 6 months after I started hormones, and they were also a trans woman who had started hormones about a couple months before I did,
Hmm.
um, and was 10 years my senior. And so there was definitely a lot of that, like I felt like I was getting what I never had as a teenager because regardless of your age, when you start taking hormones, and I can't speak to women who take testosterone, but starting hormones really does make you feel like you're starting over. Like when people say it's a
It's a
second
puberty.
puberty,
Yeah.
and so your brain is so
Malleable.
thrown out of whack
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
that to me, I felt like, oh, I'm getting what I never got when I was a teenager. I'm feeling happy. I'm liking my development. I'm falling in love with someone. And it felt like that first crush, that whirlwind romance I never had.
Yeah.
And so it was like I felt like surgeries I didn't really need to think about because I was getting a lot right then. I changed my name 6 months after I started hormones. I changed my gender marker on my documents. Um, I moved to a different state to be with the person I'd fallen in love with. I like all of these things were happening in such rapid succession that surgeries, I didn't give a shit. I was like, all of this stuff that's happening, and I felt like it was affirming that I had done the right thing. It felt like this was correct because now all of these things are finally falling into place that I never had before.
Hmm.
When really it it was just it was part of the, I don't know, I wouldn't say recklessness, but I was very compulsive, where it was, this is the thing I'm going to do now and it makes me feel great. Now this is the thing I'm going to do now, it makes me feel great. And I could ride on the things that I had done for a while before having to think about something else, which is in and of itself another drug. Um,
Hmm.
like that, when people talk about euphoria, it's a rush. It's a rush of, I feel like I'm doing something for myself that I never got to do. And when you start doing things for yourself and then more and more, it really feels like this is what I'm supposed to be doing because it's all feeling so good.
It's a you're just making me think of like Napoleon. It's like we're just going to conquer the next, conquer more, conquer more. Eventually, you're going to get
Yeah.
to Russia, and eventually, it's
Yeah.
going to be a hard winter. Maybe is that what happens? Like, how do you just keep on making choices, or do you get a therapist? Are there signs that you're not on the right path?
I got a so when I moved, I ended up starting with therapy a few months after I moved. And we did some gender talk. Um, I was very,
Gender talk. That sounds like a
I know.
SNL skit. Let's have a gender
I
talk.
I was very though I was not about what other trans women were like. And I don't know if it's because I'm a gay man
Yeah.
and most of the people I knew that were trans women were straight men. And so it was a very different thing. I was like, I'm not interested in that kind of playing a character. I had a superiority complex, I will say, because it was like, I'm already ahead of the game. I was gay and I'm short and I'm feminine and I'm small, blah, 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 blah. And hormones have done wonders because my mom's side of the family are all like, we like they wear their weight very well. And so like I grew in the right ways, like
Hmm.
really quickly, and other people were jealous of me. And so I was like, I'm really great. And so, but then I
Can
was
I'm
going to
sorry.
therapy.
I'm really sorry. Wear their
No, no,
weight
no.
very well. Like I've never heard that.
Like, like the
I can
idea,
imagine.
I know that sounds, oh shit, that's a really sexist thing to say, isn't it?
No, I mean I think that they probably came up with that phrase. We wear our
So
weight very well.
what I mean is, so my mom's older sister had been, not even overweight, like had that like chubby face, and all the women in on her side of the family are very short, like very small. My mom is under 5 feet. Her sister's like 2 inches taller. And then at one point, her sister, who's only a year older, had to have her gallbladder removed and like lost a lot of weight. And my mom was like, and part of this was like the catty, like sister to sister. She was like, she lost weight. She thinks she looks great skinny, but she looks 10 years older now. And so there's something about like the full face, the full like,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's what I mean. Where in my mind,
Midwest thick.
but
It's an
when
aesthetic.
when I was developing, I was like, oh, I'm growing fat in the right places.
Yeah.
And like
Your
these
second
guys over
development.
here look like, yeah, it was
Yeah.
like it was super cringy. I hate that I felt that way because what it did was it was
Reinforce.
another affirmation that I was supposed to be a woman.
Okay.
It was like I didn't think that I was supposed to be a woman before hormones. I just wanted to fix things. When I started taking hormones and
It
suddenly
was
a
a
lot more
project.
felt fixed, it was a project, but a lot more felt fixed than I was expecting. So I was like, oh, I am supposed to be a woman. It was like after the fact that it clicked in, like I made the right decision, which means I just didn't know I was supposed to be a woman. It was like I was a sleeper cell, like suddenly like I'm a woman and I was supposed to have been all along
Okay.
because it wouldn't all be so great otherwise. And my body was different, and it was almost like I suddenly took on this whole spiritual belief system that like because I started growing fat around my hips, that oh, my even my body is kicking into gear. Like it's been, I actually said my body has just been waiting for the hormones. My body's been waiting for the right hormones. as though my body had its own consciousness separate from, like, that's the kind of delusional thinking I started getting into. That, like, this is all supposed to go, and so any little thing I could grab to, I started using the same kind of language that my people in my upbringing used. Just instead of about God, it was about me. Like, it was very self-absorbed.
Assemblies of
It was,
gender.
yeah, yeah, it was like worshiping the god of gender, worshiping the god of hormones. Like, I've made it. I've transcended mundane reality and I've changed myself. I am the girl who
Resurrected.
lived.
Yeah.
Like, this was my Hogwarts. Like, any metaphor I could use, any belief I could use, I applied it to that.
Okay.
And so then going to therapy, um, my therapist never called me out, was like, "You're a megalomaniac. You're really narcissistic." Um, no, it was, let's take care of this stuff, because I didn't want to call myself a trans woman. This is how self-absorbed I was. I didn't want to call myself a trans woman because I didn't want to have that as a constant identity. Like, I was constantly reminding myself that I'm trans. I wanted to get through it and then just be a woman. And that was it. And because I felt like when anyone who called themselves a trans woman, they were just performing. They were just putting on an act. It was like they were just another kind of drag queen. But I was better than that. I was above that. And no.
Hmm. And your
Uh,
therapist started to ask questions that cause you to ask questions?
my therapist was very affirming, and so did not question my being a woman. Uh, Definitely believed all of that and already did. It wasn't just like me personally, but she definitely was very affirmative that, yeah, you're a woman. Let's leave it and move on and work on other issues.
Okay.
And so the questions that started coming up were more about the way I felt about myself, my thought processes, which is where my OCD diagnosis came from. She at one point said that she believed I have CPTSD, because of all of that I put myself through psychologically for so long with that playing that game. But she believed that transition had been a great uh, remedy for all of that.
Hmm.
And so she was very affirming of the fact that transition worked for me and that it wasn't just you were supposed to be this way. So I'm glad that hormones helped, but that transition actually solved some of the issues. And now I could work on unlearning other things that I taught myself before my transition. Um, so it definitely it enabled my superiority complex, where it enabled my ability to say I transition was so right for me that now I can actually work on these things. I will note, I do think that there could be some benefit in men microdosing, and I mean like microdosing, like estrogen, because I do think that, like, I had never been able to cry before. I had never been able to have serious talks about my issues without resorting to self-hatred. There were things I was able to work on
Hmm.
that estrogen kind of like switched things a little bit, but then it caused all of this other stuff, the delusional thinking, delusions of grandeur. It's almost like it helped to create more of a personality disorder, that it separated me from reality and it made me think that I had become something better.
Hmm.
Yeah.
How long does that last, that feeling, this affirmation,
Um,
this womanhood?
it lasted a while. So my relationship ended a couple years after I ended up moving back to my home state. So my therapy ended. And things were a little rocky at that point because I had had these like mainstays of like going to a therapist, having my relationship, having my life. I had moved, so it was like I had not only become a different person, but I was living in a different person's life somewhere else. And then I went back. And I felt like suddenly there was this like hollowness. Like I was so scared. And that's when I started questioning like which which things have I done that were a mistake? And I ended up writing a lot, like a lot over a few months. I wrote a lot. It was very existential, abstract. There were horror elements in it. There were supernatural elements in it. Just like a lot of the way that I could try to describe how I'd been feeling.
Hmm.
And um, I ended up, so it didn't last because I ended up dating somebody else some months later who, at this point, if I believed in true trans, I would say that this person was certainly one, not like any other trans person I'd met. And it was the first time that I realized I missed being a gay man because I was with somebody who I was like, this is actually what a trans woman is. And my basis of being a trans woman had been comparing myself against other trans women who weren't as good as me. And now I'm seeing somebody who actually legitimately is one. And I'm like, oh, I maybe I'm not.
What are the qualities of legitimate trans woman?
So at the time, it was this person never talked about trans related stuff unless it was like personally. Like they talk about like political things. Sometimes they talk about different things that a celebrity might have said. But as far as like personally, like it wasn't about the way that they looked or the way that they acted or they just existed as themselves, and which is what I had wanted all along for years, and realizing, well, if my transitioning, if it really just got me obsessed with being trans and obsessed with the elements that made me a trans woman, this person who transitioned and they achieved what I saw that I had been my original goal, which was to just exist. And so I was like, well, if that's the case, then maybe transitioning wasn't what I was supposed to have done because it didn't give me what this person has.
Which
So
is
still
just
comparing.
freedom from and freedom to be free of that. But it became a another chamber jail for you.
Yeah, and I didn't realize that because for so long it was the high. And so I thought it was freedom. Um,
But it was just liberation, I guess.
it was just it was like a bender. It was a bender of a few years of all of these things that are giving me happiness, that are giving me new meaning, that are
Mm-hmm.
giving me something happy to flood myself with instead of the depression and anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And then when all that stopped and I wasn't feeling that way anymore, I'm like, well, if I was just looking for the next fix, does that mean that transition was even valid for me? And then I start dating this other person who they still had elements of depression and they were dealing with their own like self-image and various things, and but like they just existed. Like they weren't one of those people where, oh, I'm trans, which means I'm on the high of being trans. That wasn't a thing for them. It was, no, this is just who I am. It didn't like fix things. It's just who I am.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh, I never got that. I never got that this is who I am. I got this is me now. Like there's a difference.
Hmm. Okay.
Um,
And so that planted an idea that maybe estrogen transition isn't for you.
it planted the idea that maybe, so at first it was, well, maybe I'm non-binary because of
Did you
course a
entering
new
into
thing.
trans? Did you do a they them period?
Mm-mm,
Okay,
I didn't
but
know.
now that is a possibility that they them
It
non-binary.
was not something that I was seriously considering. It was more, it the
How do I
idea of
categorize
being
myself?
not even that, it was the idea of being non-binary is different than going back. Because I didn't want to go back because that would be admitting that I failed, because that would be admitting I was wrong.
Okay.
And so saying I'm non-binary would just be a new step in my evolution.
Okay.
And so it was more of like that, I can't admit that this was wrong. So maybe this is what's right instead.
Okay.
I didn't go into that. I didn't pursue that. That was just like a maybe.
Okay.
Um,
Because I just
but
I'm still stumped by the non-binary stuff. Like what?
and
Like
that's why I didn't, because I was like, I never legitimately really bought into non-binary. And so I was like, to call myself that really just wouldn't feel legitimate, because why would I call myself something I don't believe in? Um,
hmm.
but yeah, I went through a weird phase where I was with this person, and um I wasn't questioning a lot, and it wasn't like a constant like I'm not trans. It was, but it was making me think about like what does it mean for me to be trans, instead of all of this hype and euphoria and something new. Well, if this person it just is, what does it mean for me to be trans? Like I wanted to then like think like, okay, I am a trans woman, but how can I do that without all of that haywire feeling of, being all up and down?
Hmm.
And so that's what started me on the process of, it took me a long time to get to the point of knowing that I wasn't, because it was trying to figure out, if I am, what does that mean for me in like a normal, stable way? And it took me another year and a half of I started watching conservative trans people on YouTube. I started acquainting myself a little bit with um like the non woke voices, because I had been very inundated in that as well, not just in being trans. Um and it took being away from a lot of people that were affirming me to just have my own voice.
Hmm.
And I don't know how to explain it. It was when the throes were over, and the that whole source of euphoria was gone. It wasn't depression, because I didn't suddenly feel down. It was it was like like that serotonin hangover you get like after you've had like a really fun weekend. It was like that, only it was more of like reality was setting in. Like this is either I'm just going to exist and like be this, or and then that or was a dot. Like I didn't know what else to do. I was very lost,
Hmm.
very lost. Um, yeah. And even now, like talking about it, like I'm not even sure where to go with it, because I'm still figuring that out. Um, not being trans, because I know that I'm not, but I'm still figuring out like what do I do with the rest of it? Like what do I do with what is still there that transition didn't help?
Okay, so transition helps something, or at least put your mind in a completely different orientation to who you are, what you are, how you interact with the world, and then you go through a phase of doubt, and then you decide to detransition. What does detransition look like?
Um, so detransition came because I realized that it's I wasn't a woman.
Okay.
That transition didn't make me that.
Okay.
That transition didn't change my existence. Um, and I'm like, if my if the way that I feel as a trans person only hinged upon being trans and being part of all that,
Hmm.
is it even real? Like, does it even have a basis? So detransition started as I wanted to take a break from hormones and see how I felt with it. And could I not be on them? Would I be okay without them? Because people will say, like, you stop taking hormones, you're going to feel terrible. You're going to go through withdrawals. You're going to feel dysphoria. And I stopped the hormones and I didn't start feeling euphoria because it wasn't like the inverse of taking hormones. I just started to feel less frenetic. Like I wasn't feeling that like need to do something, that need to prove something.
Hmm.
Because like being on hormones, like you said, like you were asking, there's always more. There's always another step. There's always something else. And if it's not in the form of surgery, it's do I pass? Do people know what I am? Do I come off as attractive to people who I might be interested in? Do like there's so much obsession in it. And once I was off of hormones, it mattered less. I was like, I don't need to pass. I don't want to pass. And then I was like, well, there's nothing to pass as. Like it kind of just,
Hmm.
and it was like when I started hormones and my brain started going in one direction, not being on them anymore, it just kind of that started to dissipate where I was like, I want to be stable. Like I want to be in a like state of normalcy. I hadn't been working a full-time job in a long time. I hadn't been feeling like I was maintaining like my normal um, hygiene routine. I wasn't feeling good in social relationships. Like my obsession had gotten so big. And so when I stopped the hormones, I was like, I'd like to get a semblance of normalcy back.
Hmm.
And it's like when you take a drug long enough and you become immune to the high of it, or it's like caffeine. I'll use caffeine. Sometimes you have caffeine and it wakes you up. It makes you in a better place. You can function. Sometimes you have caffeine, you go too far with it and you're no longer functional. You have the jitters, you're anxious,
Hmm.
you're sweating. Like there's not that same kind of like clicked in being awake. It was like that with hormones. It was like that with transition, where it got to a certain point where it was no longer, I'm feeling good, I'm feeling up, I'm feeling myself. It was that I'm anxious about how I look, I'm anxious about what people think of me. I
Hmm.
was in this mode of obsessing over that. And so then I stopped the hormones and I was like,
Did you
the
just go
detransition
right
is
off
just
them?
like, I did,
Oh,
I
cold
did.
turkey.
I haven't, yeah, because again, I wanted to see how I felt. And with each day, I was like, I feel fine.
Oh, okay.
And so I just didn't go back to
But then testosterone is
them.
comes back. So I mean, your original hormone starts to return. How's that?
It was a little annoying for a bit. Luckily I had stopped. By annoying, I mean, so I had stopped,
Is this like a carrying your weight well? Is this like a euphemism? It's annoying. Like I just so
no,
many different
no.
ways that testosterone can be annoying.
So I had stopped, I had been smoking a lot of weed
Oh,
and
okay.
drinking a lot of coffee. And so I had stopped both of those
Oh,
before I stopped hormones.
okay.
Um, and so I had, like, I stopped like a lot all at once. And my, my testosterone was never very high. Like when I first had gotten tested, when I started hormones,
Hmm.
I was at
Hmm.
like the base minimum of what
Yeah.
is like the measurement for male testosterone.
Hmm.
So it wasn't like I suddenly went into this like super ragey. I was more on edge. Um, my my libido was definitely stronger, but I wasn't. It wasn't like a I have to do something about it. It was just like this. I don't know how to describe it. It was annoying.
Yeah.
It was like I just wanted to feel normal, and I'd forgotten that some of the things that came with normalcy with testosterone.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I also hadn't started my new job yet, so I had a little bit of time in between. I was very lucky where like I had gone a couple months without a job, and that was during those couple months that I'd stopped
Okay.
the hormones, and so I had some time. to be the way I was. But then I went on Twitter. That's when I started on Twitter. Um, and I found myself starting to obsess again, where I was now engaging in GC spaces. I was now engaging in being detrans. I was suddenly going into the same kind of thing I had been going into when I started transitioning. And but then I became aware of it where I was like, this is too much. I'm trying to be normal. This is not helping. Like I thought it was going to be, I'm going to be communing with people. I can express myself. But then I was in a space every day and I was talking to people all the time. And suddenly I was like, this is the same thing that I did when I started transition. And that's when I was like, this is the thing that I should have gone to therapy about, not transition.
Hmm.
Like, this is my, and so I was like, I don't know if I have a personality disorder where I get obsessive. I don't know if it's the OCD. Um,
It could be very, very productive if channeled in the right direction.
it could be, but it was getting to the point where I'm like, I need to recover
Yeah.
before I try to start engaging with a different group of people.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
yeah, it was getting ridiculous. Like my best friend noticed it. They were like, "You're on your phone and talking about Twitter. Like you talk about Twitter every day, and you're talking about this stuff like a lot. And I'm just worried that you're doing the same thing that you felt like you did before."
Yeah.
And I was annoyed that they pointed it out, not at them, but I was annoyed that they were right. And I was like, I need to not do that because it was the same thing.
Hmm.
The same thing. I do it over and over again. Like I'm always looking for what it is that's going to satisfy like the itch of I want to do something.
Okay.
And then when I like what it gives me, I want to do it more and more.
Well, I mean, I'm not a therapist. I'm not your therapist, certainly, but it seems like it could be a very powerful mode of engaging with the world as long as it's not narcissistic, as long as it's not about you and your identity. If it's
Right.
like channeled to a good cause, it could be really, really good to just like
Hmm.
be immersed doing that. Like that's just why we invented careers. It's like this is what I'm all about. I'm going to trade on Wall Street or whatever it is, right? I'm going to sell
Hmm.
some real estate and stuff. So, I mean, I don't think that it's a negative quality to you. I mean, the world needs people like you. It's just if it's causing you to think about you, then you're not helping the world, right?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I'm in a point right now though. I'm still iffy. Like, do I want to help the world?
Yeah.
Because
Well, you can burn it down if that's what you want to do. I mean, your skill
well,
set,
I don't mean in that
you
sense.
could do a lot of damage too if you want.
It I mean in the sense of I want to actually help myself for real.
Okay.
Like I feel like I've tried to, um, but if I'm here and I'm detransitioning and I'm having this conversation with you, how much have I actually helped myself? How much have if I
Hmm.
had gone so long trying to be something that I wasn't and hiding what I was, and then I came out as what I was, and I started to treat myself really poorly for it. This is the coming out as gay.
Yeah.
And then I finally got to a point where I wanted to be somebody else altogether. And now I'm back to being me, but it's different because transition, no matter what, it changes you. Like I'm never going to be the person I was before. Like detransition is sort of a misnomer. Like I'm never going to be the older person. And I don't want to be how I was before anyway, because I was miserable then.
Hmm.
But it's like now that I'm here, how do I how do I know it's trying to know what is real and it's trying to know who I actually am. Because I feel like everything I've been has either been hiding something or reacting to something. I've either been hiding who I am or I've been reacting to being who I am. It's like it's exhausting.
Yeah, it's exhausting. I'm just wondering, like, why not just like let it go, like let God
And that's what
and
I'm
other people just like I don't know what I am, but I just
right.
like let that go.
And that's what I've been doing. I've been working full time and I'm keeping myself stable there. I've been on Twitter a healthy amount. Like I disengage when I feel myself getting riled up. because it's pointless. I don't have a big support locally just because I'm not really live.
Yeah.
My best friend does live nearby. We see each other when we can, so that is good. Um, I'm I'm working on just existing,
Yeah.
so it is good. Like I'm not.
Are you making
I did
things? Are you feeling that creative engagement and being able to find something that can be fun?
some somewhat. I've gone kayaking a few times, which I hadn't done in years, so that's a good outlet.
Do you
I am
tickle
finding
the
different outlets.
ivories?
I don't. I
Oh,
haven't in a long
a long
time. No,
time.
no, no, no. It's yeah. It's just I haven't. I've thought about it. Um, but yeah, just existing, and sometimes that looks like vegging on TV for several hours. Sometimes it's just I don't want to push myself into anything anymore.
Yeah.
Um, and so like that's partly what like I was hesitant to do this because I'm like I want to now have my face, have my voice on something as speaking in this way. Not like,
Hmm.
do I want to be public, which that has been a thing too, because I'm like,
Yeah.
but more once you engage in a certain way, now people know you in that certain way.
As oh,
Right.
this is the Detrans gay dude.
Right. And I'm like, I don't want to
Yeah.
be that. Like
No.
I'm just
You are you.
and
Yeah.
like I'm enjoying kind of being in this sort of like that blank space where like at work I don't do pronouns. Like I don't say pronouns at all at this point. Um, I've had a couple people ask me, and I just say I don't do that, and they're like, okay. But at work, like I've had some people say she because they assume that having long hair, and I've kept my trans name because I'm like going through the whole legal thing right now is like I'm not interested in that again. So I've kept it for now. I also applied for my current job before I started detransitioning.
Yeah.
So I'm
I
like
don't
at this
blame you.
point, I'm like, it's
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
But also, it's like I have a name that people think is a female name, but I'm not a woman. But then some people say she, some people say he. I have people call me they,
So you're
and I don't
effectively
respond.
non-binary.
I, I guess it's I'm effectively a binary. I'm
Yeah.
effectively a,
Yeah.
and I don't even want to say a gender because that's a thing. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
everything is a thing, and I'm so
Yeah.
tired of all the labels. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I just exist. Like
Yeah.
I have long hair, but like I sometimes I have my facial hair, and 'cause I still have some left. Um, and it's
So
like I, I don't want to play that game because that's the game that got me obsessed.
yeah.
Like I transition. I definitely have had body dysmorphia for a long time. That was part of my whole transition thing, and like always feeling like I had to fit my body a certain way because my brain was a certain way,
Hmm.
and like your body is something you can control to an extent. And so I'm like, I'm just done with all of it. I can't do that anymore.
Your poor mother. So how do you come out yet again to her,
So I didn't come out. So we had a
or
conversation where
come back in, or whatever? I don't know what the.
she was relieved because I told her that I can't remember how the conversation went, but basically saying, I've realized I made a mistake,
Hmm.
and I said I'm not really doing anything about it right now. I'm just stepping back from it. And I said, I guess detransition could be a term for it. I said I've been so obsessed with it. I'm done.
Hmm.
And she said she was proud of me for being able to admit that I made a mistake. Um, I haven't formally apologized, not because I feel like, and I know I actually just had a thread yesterday that people have taken a bit of umbrage to with. I mean, I'm not going to blame
About
anybody
the
for that.
affirmation, about everybody affirming you.
No, about how I will only apologize to myself. Um,
Yeah.
I don't say that in a way to be like, I don't owe anyone an apology ever because nobody has been hurt by me, but more, I I owe myself an apology first and foremost. And if I will apologize to people, it'll be people in my personal life, and I'm not going to be expected to announce that. Um, like the thread was sparked because there was another Detrans gay man that people were expecting to apologize to women. And I don't find that odd because I find apologizing to women odd. I found it odd because, for the most part, gay men who transition are largely championed by women. And so it's like,
Hmm.
I understand that. I understand now that transition has misogynistic, but is misogynistic, regardless of who's doing it, regardless of which sex you are. But I don't know. I'm not going to apologize to people who were the majority of my supporters. Um, and it's not to say that that women aren't owed an apology for what transition is in general. It's like I was supported. Now, talking about in this conversation about how it went with my mom, I should apologize to her. But I don't want to just be like, I'm sorry for what I put you through, because that just sounds so
Performative.
right. Like in my job, like with what I do, like we're told, like, you can apologize, but empathy is much more important. Not, oh, I'm so sorry, because it can be performative. It can also sound like my saying sorry is more for me than for the person I'm apologizing to. Like,
Yeah.
do you forgive me? Like, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
What my intention is to now live in a way that is realistic, but that I'm not expecting people to just kowtow to everything that I want.
Yeah.
I would
There.
I would rather be empathetic than apologetic.
Well, the how women feel and what you owe women aside, what we all owe women. I owe my existence to women too. Like
Oh, and
all honor to
and
women.
I posted a clarification of that. I was
Yeah.
like, I would not be who I am without like
Yeah.
they have been one of the strongest, most significant forces in my life.
Word.
So yeah,
That said, if you were to speak to a gay man who might be going the direction that you're going, what do you think are some things that you could have been focusing on that transition was a false solution to? The homophobia or something like that, and how have you come to accept yourself? That's specific to a male, specific to you from your experience.
being able to cut the bullshit and be honest with yourself. Um, I know there are a lot of men in general, but as a gay man, I know that there's a lot of repression, whether it's homophobic or not. There's a lot of um, this idea of being performative. I mean, when you have heterosexual people, you have men and you have women, and men expect women to be performative for their sake. When you have men and men, men are being performative for each other's sake all the time.
Yeah,
And so
women do that
there's
too.
a
Just to be fair.
no, 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 they do,
Yeah,
but I don't have context as a
yeah,
lesbian
yeah,
or as a woman. So
yeah. Okay.
you asked me about gay men.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So gay men will perform for each other, whether it is sexually, physically, aesthetically, whether it is um, being into the right trends and fads, whether it's being for the right causes. Like there's a lot that
Yeah.
men will perform for each other, and so there's this idea of like sort of putting yourself into the box of how you want to be appealing. Be honest with yourself. And a lot of that whole message of like it gets better and love who you love and be true to yourself. But that message is so hollow when you have a lot of gay men who are not being true to themselves. They're being true to how they want people to accept them, which I get because when you're a minority group, and I don't use that term very often, but when you're a small group of people compared to the rest of the population, you want to find acceptance within that small group of people.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, then like where else do you go? But and so then I transitioned, and I don't blame gay men, but like I didn't often feel like I was belonging. I felt a lot more feminine, and I was sort of looked over because I'm not tall and I'm not muscular, and So like there are certain things physically that I just don't kind of match up to.
Hmm.
But I wish that instead of thinking that I should have transitioned, be like, it doesn't change that I exist. It doesn't
Hmm.
change that I'm a guy. It doesn't change that I'm gay. Like just because other people don't want me for these reasons, like what? I'm going to become someone else? And that's what I would say. Like, don't try to become someone else. And I know it's easier said than done because
Sometimes it takes a
hindsight,
long time to
it
become
does.
enough of yourself to not try to become someone else.
Right, right. But that's what I mean. Like, cut the bullshit. Like,
Yeah.
be honest with yourself. Like, be honest that you are scared. Be honest that you have times where you wonder if you're going to survive this weird life. Be honest that you, what you want. Do you really want to wear the right thing and fuck the right guy so that you can feel like you're accepted for a day? Like, do you really just want that? Because that's what it was for me then. It was the same thing as that rush of euphoria during transition. It's that what's the next feeling I can get to make me feel like I'm acceptable as a gay guy? Who's the next guy that I can make find me, physically attractive? It was like that constant seeking validation, affirmation
Yeah.
to give me that high.
Yeah.
And I do think a lot of gay men do that, that there's a lot of that. How can I get this guy to be attracted to me? How can I make this guy accept me
Hmm.
instead of just being?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there's a difference between homosexual and gay. Homosexual is the nature of what you are. Your biology is oriented towards biology of these kinds of people, men and men, women and women. Gay is the culture aspect. Gay is the personality aspect. Gay is the communal aspect. Like
The
gay is
tribal,
the
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 signal. Yeah.
social connection to the biology.
Yeah.
And a lot of people forget that the only framework for what being gay is homosexuality. That's literally the only requirement to be gay.
Hmm.
There's no other requirement.
Hmm.
And you're not gay unless you're homosexual. And so, but being gay only requires that you be homosexual. So
Yeah.
why are we're trying so hard to be part of the gay culture? You already are, just for the fact that you're a guy that likes guys.
Well,
That's all you need to do.
and then it goes so far that straight people want to be part of the gay culture because that's how you be cool. So then they invent this thing called the Q or the queer, and then their LARPing is gay because they're looking for acceptance too
Yeah,
or
yeah,
cred on some
over
sort.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
over it. Yeah, it's like the new version of um like the fag hag. Like you don't it's not enough to be friends with them anymore. You want to be more adjacent.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of that is a rejection of how a lot of people grew up. Like a lot of us grew up in like Western countries at least. There's a lot of traditionalism, a lot of religion, a lot of like patriarchal oversight. And so millennials, even if
Just
there's no so
I don't know like if that's lessened anywhere other than the West. I think that's kind of
oh
uh,
no, I'm sure. Okay, my framework is of being in a Western country, so I don't
yeah.
want to speak to Eastern countries, if that means like I haven't studied
Yeah. Okay.
Eastern
I'm just
cultures.
saying
So I'll clarify that.
all
I'll clarify
cultures
that.
across space at least are pretty
Yes. But there's
religious
there's
in nature.
definitely a so I'll speak in a US framework then. So there's a lot of rebellion against how we were raised, which is also normal. A lot of people rebel against how they grew up. But I think a lot of what I'm seeing now of trans acceptance, of being queer, there's this idea of, well, growing up, our parents didn't like those gay people. Growing up, it was not okay to be. And so now instead of it just being like, you're gay, okay, cool.
Yeah.
It's now we have to be so accepting that we become part of it. So then, because then it turns into my version of rebellion is being queer. My version of saying my parents were wrong is, but you don't have to prove anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stop trying to prove something. It's like how often you have allies be the ones who allies. who are the ones who will enforce a certain guideline about how to be accepting of all people in the LGBTQ, or
It's
how to
it's the
enforce
same.
people
It's the
being
same
a
kind of fundamentalism that causes the homophobia in the first place.
yep.
It's just now being just a vanilla cis person is like the deviant. Now you're the deviant one.
Yeah.
Just like just be yourself.
Yeah.
Just
And
be chill.
it's like
Hmm.
people are so afraid of representing the thing that somebody doesn't like that they want to become what they like. So they don't want to say something that, oh, that sounds like something that one of those Christians might say. So instead, well, let me prove to you that I'm not like them by becoming one of you. And it's like this
Hmm.
overstepping instead of it just being, well, no, I believe this, but I also believe this. It's, well, let me show you
Yeah.
so that every time you look at me or think about me, you know I'm one of you. It's such a signal. It's such it's all so performative.
Yeah. So where are you headed? Where do you think you're headed?
I don't know,
Just gonna chill,
honestly. Kind of. I
mouth
mean,
off on the internet infrequently.
possibly. I mean, I could delete my Twitter at some point because I get sick of it. That
Yeah.
happened already once. But I mean, I'm looking into, I'm not looking into, I'm looking forward to um, potentially moving up a bit where I work. Um, I want to just sort of enjoy being alive. I've always had
Hmm.
something of a direction of a where am I headed.
Yeah.
You know, being Christian, well, you're headed towards these certain things as a Christian adult. Being gay, well, there are these certain things that you're well, not that's expected, but I expected of myself, things that I needed to be that, to be doing. As trans, there's a very specific direction. And now it's like I don't want to see myself in the future.
Okay.
Like I don't want to see where I'm heading because once I start doing that, I lose sight of the present.
Yeah. Okay. But you still want to progress.
I want to, yes,
Yeah.
yes, I do, but I don't want to assume
Realistically.
what
Yeah.
that might be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Any to kind of wrap up the conversation, do you have any hidden talents? I like to ask people that.
Hidden talents.
Something you're really good at, like surprisingly, like shockingly good at.
um, Ghosting people when I have plans. I'm not really sure how to
You're good at.
answer that.
Okay, yeah, you're good at going out.
No, I'm good at shirking the plans.
Oh, okay.
I'm good at, the next morning, hey, I'm really sorry I fell asleep, or hey, I'm really sorry I really had a really rough day and I forgot all about it.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel close to you on that point.
I used to be really forcefully extroverted, and so I'm because like being around people meant I wasn't around myself.
Okay, so you're
And now,
experimenting with introversion.
hmm
Oh, okay. Interesting.
hmm
It's a new
I
chapter
like a
in
lot more
life.
than I used to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, Ciel, thank you for I'm just gonna call you Le Ciel because that's all you gave me. So I don't even know. Is that the sun? Is that the sun?
The sky.
Oh, okay. Close. They're associated. Well, Mr. Sky, thanks for agreeing to speak with me. I had this interesting perspective. There's a lot of the trans and detrans stories are always just very different,
Mm,
and so the more I get to hear them, the more other people get to see that it's not just one thing that everybody does, whether they're pro or anti or skeptical of the movement, so called. It's important to hear and to broaden our understanding of why people choose and choose to go in to go out of it. So thank you.
yeah, yeah. And I want to finish. I'm not anti-trans people. Um, but I am anti-transition as a treatment, unless like there I don't know everything. So there could be causes for it. Um, there could be situations where it does work for people. But in general, I'm against the practice because it's not informed the way they say it is.
Hmm.
It's not um, it's not successful to the extent they say it is. And yeah. Um, yeah, I was also going to say, try not to make me look too disordered or unhinged. I think I went on for a little bit at one point.
I'm not making you
So
do
yeah.
anything. I don't think you should worry about that. It was a very edifying. You're talented at speaking, so don't worry about that. Well,
Yeah.
let's
Thank
wrap
you.
up the recording part. You want to say goodbye to the audience?
Thanks for watching.
C'est la
I
vie.
yes, yes, I appreciate that. That is one of my hidden talents is not closing a conversation.
Oh, well, I'm gonna do it for you.